Hi, just a brief introduction before we start. We are Brandscapes. This is Bharat. He heads our big data and analytics practice, and I'm Asha. I'm a consulting partner and one of the early consultants to the organization. Today we're here to talk about conversations with data, how not to miss the woods for the trees. I think we always talk about data-driven insights and their core to decision making. Oh, I seem to have clicked. So we talk about data-driven insights that are core to decision making. I think the good news is, as we've heard since the morning, and we're all aware that we live in a world of data. And organizations are adding to what they already have every day, every hour, every minute, every second. In fact, even if you move away from what we call the big data space, and therefore I suppose what we could not call small data, which is sample data, etc., even if that's not multiplying, like Victor Hugo said, in swarms like vermin, sometimes it actually seems so. By the end of a few months, you say, oh my God, I've got all of this. And I think the problem, therefore, comes about as to what to do with this data. We have a proliferation of tools. We have our spreadsheets, the traditional presentations, you have more evolved dashboards, there's a plethora of analytical tools out there as well. But very often, and we're left with the feeling that we're just swamped with all this data, and also a niggling sensation that we haven't quite got to where we wanted to go with the data. And why is this so? I think the basic premise on which several tools function is that it presumes a high degree of familiarity and comfort with the data to start with. I think the second thing that it presumes for you is what do you want to see and how do you want to see it. And it assumes in many ways that every user of data is a data expert, which, let's face facts, isn't so. Data is important, but how do we use it? Everybody is not an expert in this field. And therefore, what do we need? Questions which come to mind is, what if I want to look at something a little differently? What if I need to take a side path in order to learn and assimilate from my data a little more? What do we do in such cases? I think the basic question that we've asked ourselves, I mean, I've worked on the agency side, I've worked in an organization, and you see this every time, that there are times when you have to get you do feel overwhelmed with data. I think Varun he said we assimilate data in bite-sized pieces. So how do you ensure that you're not overwhelmed with the data and so lost in those individual data bites that you're actually missing the overall picture? I think just taking a step back from this is to remember that we're all human. I think the human brain is hardwired for narratives, stories, and conversations. We are made of stories. We have, ancient civilizations have a rich tradition of handing down learning orally. We have epics which were handed down through generations, all through stories and narratives. And truly, sometimes reality as we know it is very complex. Stories give it form. We do it every day ourselves. You put up a chart full of numbers and then you say, okay, let me try and make sense for you, and then you tell a little story or a narrative or an anecdote around it. And of course, our favorite pen portraits, meet Amanda, she's 25, she lives in London, she lives in this part of London, she works in a bank and she takes Zumba classes in the evening. So you bring it to life through words, through stories, a little bit, a small story to make sense of the complexity of the data that we're looking at. I think the question to be asked is, therefore, what does this have to do with data? I think what we are saying is, what and why can't we interrogate or question or converse with our data at our own pace? Why can't you talk with your data and have dialogues with it? Why should it be dictated by somebody else who says, you need to look at it in this way, this is how you should do it, and this is what you should look at? What if you could actually have conversations with your data at your pace? Who knows, maybe the process of this would actually uncover the next insight about your consumer, or maybe that process also throws up your next big idea. And therefore imagine conversations like this.
Good evening, sir. I am glad you are back. How can I help you today?
Knowing that Avon is our brand, I would like to consider the top of mind awareness for the same. Tell me the top awareness for Avon in all regions for the latest round.
Sit back while I process your data. Voila. The chart is here with logical inference unique to your question.
There it is. Seems like in Metro, Avon is quite popular.
Would you also like to ask the Tom awareness for Avon, Garnier, and Revlon in all regions for round 5?
Looks like Jiffy has read my mind. Yes, I would like to know about my competitors too. I agree, Jiffy. It seems like Revlon is doing well in round 5. Now let's check how well our brand Avon was recognized in the latest round.
You can also choose the question from the suggestion box without the hassle of typing it. Hover over the chart to see the data points. Play around with the graph by filtering the data on the fly.
I would like to have these charts available offline.
Just clicking on the PT icon will download all the charts and their inferences into a PowerPoint presentation for your use. That's all for now. Goodbye, sir. Have a great day.
The possibilities are enormous with metric bots. And metric bots allow us to converse with our data, engage with it, experience it in a dialogue or in a conversation. So you get instantaneous responses, you can talk with your data in order to get insights in a manner that is more natural, using simple everyday conversational language. And now I'm going to hand over to Bharat, who's going to give us a glimpse of the possibilities of metric bots.
Yeah, thanks, Sasha. Just to give you an intuitive sense of what are metric bots, all of you I'm sure would have used chatbots, right? While chatbots allow you to answer your frequently answered questions, get your customer service queries resolved, metric bots allow you to converse with data. They allow you to explore data, look at data from different angles, and then work with you in the process of generating insights. So what is the typical design while building a metric bot? It needs a natural language processor because it needs to understand the simple natural language used by the user. At the heart of the design is a machine learning engine which continuously learns and evolves over time. And then there is a natural language generator, which again needs to convert the machine output into natural language, which can be fed back to the user. So that's the entire design in a nutshell. The heart of any metric bot design is, of course, the machine learning engine, which learns every time the user interacts with the bot, the kind of questions that it asks, the kind of terminologies that is used, the kind of mistakes that are made. Even the mistakes, for example, are used in the process of learning. It could be spelling mistakes. For example, a new user could come and just ask, what is TOMA for Singapore last year? In case metric bot hasn't heard of TOMA, it throws in a response, hey, I haven't heard of TOMA, did you mean top of mind awareness? And in which case the user says yes, that's again a learning process, right? And so that in a nutshell is a design for a metric bot.
Hi, I'm Jiffy, here to help you with your business questions. I have good understanding of your data. Feel free to ask me any question, and I will create the relevant charts in a jiffy. I will be available on the click of a button while you are on the move. My routes are based on 3A framework that is interactive, as my access is not limited by time, device, or location. Intuitive, as I process queries in simple language. And integrated, as I can access data across data sources or categories. The 3A framework binds me to give you quick outputs accurately.
Yeah, the morning panel talked about the importance of DIY platforms, right, which empower your end users to look at data from various perspectives. The endeavor of Jiffy is towards that. At a fundamental level, metric bots can be of two types. One is command bots, the other being conversational bots. Now, what is the difference? Command bots, as the name implies, looks at every individual user request as a standalone request. Say you could ask, what is the sales last year for Singapore? That is treated as an individual request, and it generates an output. You could ask, what is my inventory for trend for the last 3 years? It could throw a response. Conversational bots, on the other hand, understand the user, understand the context in which a question is asked, and then provides a customized response. That's what makes the entire experience of conversational bots much more interesting, much more engaging, and from a design perspective, much more challenging as well. To give you an intuitive sense why it's challenging, conversational bots need to have memory. It needs to understand the user. It needs to know what are the typical kinds of questions that are generally asked by the user. And that's what makes the entire process of generating insights, partnering with the user much more engaging. Yeah. Now we'll show you two scenarios of how users could work with metric bots. Of course, metric bots are data agnostic, so it could access any kind of data. It could be a brand track, it could be a panel data, it could be transactional data running over crores of records and so on. Yeah. Say you're a brand manager, and the brand manager wants to understand what is the volume for his brand vis-a-vis competition in the last quarter. So all he needs to do is ask the question in simple natural language, and then Jiffy throws out an immediate response. Now what next? So once the user asks a question, Jiffy then prompts you with a new question. For example, hey, you've asked for volume trends in the last quarter. Would you like to see the trend across all the quarters? And it prompts you for a next question. That's how it engages with you. And how does the prompt work? Somebody in the morning was talking about Amazon, how it recommends based on what other users purchase, right? So the way metric bot works is it understands your pattern, it understands your usage from your past behavior, and it also understands what users similar to you, similar brand managers of other brands have asked, the nature of questions that they have asked in the past, and then it prompts you for a question. Yeah, and typically there could be different kinds of users. There could be a self-directed user who knows exactly what he wants, in which case he need not go with the prompt. He could just type in his own request, or you could interact, engage with the bot going with the prompt, and then it allows you to engage and get insights. Yeah. So this is one more scenario where the user wanted to understand the sales performance across different countries for a particular category. course, one disclaimer, all the data that you see is dummy data, is more for illustrative purposes. So then once the inference is that Indonesia had the highest sales, then Jiffy prompts. So now that you know that the highest performance is in Indonesia, would you like to do a deep dive within Indonesia and look at the performance of other brands and so on? Yeah, and also the interaction or the relationship between different variables. Yeah, so really sky is the limit. So in terms of the nature of questions that you ask, it could be any kind of business question, and it gives the answer in a jiffy. Yeah. The key advantages, one is it's data agnostic, pretty much any kind of data research, transactional. It also, I'm sure many of the business questions that you have would span across different systems, right? Because many of the business questions are complex to answer, for which you need to have, say, a few data points from brand track, a few from household panel, a few from digital, maybe. So one of the key advantages is the ability to integrate data from diverse source systems and then help you answer your business questions. Yeah, yeah. We would like to end this by having this quote from Seneca, the famous Roman philosopher, who talked about the charm of conversation and how it can help elicit secrets. Amazing how even after so many centuries, this statement is true, still true, and probably would be true next 1,000 years as well. Yeah. Yeah, and we have a live kiosk as well outside. We would love if, love to give you a demo anytime. Yeah, that's it from our end. Any questions? Glad to answer.
So no, thanks, Asha and Bharat. While I was listening to you, I was reminded, I think, a question in the morning. I think it was Elizabeth who asked that, how do we, are companies and organizations really using the data which they have at their fingertips? And we talked about that, yes, one is looking at, for big strategic campaigns, one gets into data and insights. But for day-to-day business intelligence, there is, if I'm a frontline sales guy, I struggle to use my CRM, extract data, and be more data-driven. So I can clearly, see one application for this as a business intelligence assistant, really helping people be more data-driven. But guys, open for thoughts, reflections, questions. Yeah. Maybe the lady over there.
Yeah, I understand that it can look at numbers and lots of different data. Can it integrate verbatims in with the numbers, so words as well as numbers?
Yeah, it can.
Sorry. By the way, I'm Ling Ling from PNG. My question is, what is the foundation of leveraging this bot?
You mean the technical platform?
Yes, it looks like the system should be already integrated in certain ways. Therefore, it can be built on top of.
Yeah, so the way it works is typically there is a one-time training phase where Jiffy the bot is trained about your company's own terminology, the specific KPIs, business questions that you would like to answer. And after that, it learns on its own. So typically, there are various ways in which you could design deep learning, reinforcement learning, and so on. One of the methods that we use is what we call as active learning, which is a semi-supervised learning methodology, which is a partnership between a human being and the bot. So it's also called human in the loop learning process, where we feel the best results come from that kind of a partnership, where the bot learns over time based on inputs from the end users.
I think your question was a little different, right? I think what she was asking was before you build the bot, before you build a Jiffy, if you have multiple databases,
yes,
then you will need to
integrate it. Yes, absolutely.
You will have to, it either you have it, you've got your data lake created, or that is something.
Or that is something
that can be done.
I see. I have another question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
this is for this is to leveraging on the existing internal systems and databases. I'm wondering whether this can be used for engaging consumers to have the results or insights right after we talk to consumers. So like consumer like chatbot. Is
Sure.
this something that's considered?
Yeah, sure. Why
So
not?
that's another application.
Absolutely.
It could be a chatbot more than anything
Yeah,
else.
absolutely. See, bots at a broad sense could broadly categorized as information delivery or information collection. So a lot of bots are also being used to collect information as well from end consumers.
Great presentation, thank you. So I had two questions. First one was, in organizations have multiple IT systems. So there could be
Right.
one sales data on one system, pricing information on another system. So does the bot connect between the systems and then cull out the right information, or how does that work?
Yeah, so it can work in two ways. One is if you already have a central repository, a data warehouse, data lake, whatever, then the bot can directly sit on top of the data lake. In case you don't have a data lake, but you have diverse
Many
different
lakes.
systems,
Yeah.
the bot can integrate, pick up the relevant, say, KPIs A, B from system A, C, D from another system, and so on.
And does it also process qualitative inputs?
Yeah, it can process qualitative inputs as well.
So what is the logic behind to process the qualitative input?
So the underlying design is still the same. So you have a natural language processing engine which understands the natural language done by the user. There is a machine learning algorithm which learns over time. Even with qualitative data or quantitative data, there would be an initial phase, what we call as training the bot or training Jiffy, where it understands those nuances and then self-learning over a period of time.
Thank you.
I think let's take one last question.
Yeah, thanks. This is really interesting stuff.
Thank you.
And I think also one of the things I mentioned this morning, what we hope to see more of, very in practice. One thing I'm very curious about, because I've read into machine learning used for image recognition and all these other applications.
Yeah.
It seems like you need millions and millions and millions of observations just to get a very simple analysis correctly. How long is the learning process in these cases for these sets of data that you're looking at, whether sales data or anything else?
Yeah. So the more data, the better. Especially for images, the number of data points required would be slightly higher. And as I said, different companies are at different levels of maturity. So one method we would recommend is, even if you don't have huge amounts of data to start with, you could have a simpler rule-based engine, right, which could give equally good results. You don't need to directly get into a deep learning framework or a reinforcement learning framework. Start with simple rules. Say, for example, given the same business problem, say if I give a business problem to all the people in this room, say 100, 120 odd, I'm sure each of you would have your own way of interpreting data and coming up with your own inferences. That is 120 data points. That's enough to get the ball rolling.
So then, rather than using deep machine learning, you'd say there are specific rules of what kind of requests I want the chatbot in this case to be able to handle, and I pre-program those. So the learning process doesn't have to be a very extensive and long period.
Yeah, absolutely. Start small and then keep building on top of it. That's what we would recommend.
I think the rule, as with everything, is to design optimally rather than, do we need that level of engineering in order to deliver with what we have today? So that's the principle on which we can work.
Okay, well, thanks a lot, Asha and Bharat.
Thank you.